The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today we're back with Tony Baird, Chief Technology Officer at Vodafone New Zealand, soon to be One NZ. Welcome along, Tony.
Kia ora, Paul. How are you?
Great. It's really good to catch up again. It's been a while, but there's been a huge amount going on in the world of tech and telecommunications since we last spoke. So looking forward to delving in. Before we start, huge thank you to our show partners for keeping the New Zealand Tech Podcast operating and for their broad support of the tech and innovation ecosystems in New Zealand. That includes Vodafone. Also 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Well, so many things to talk about. I've kind of got a list as long as my arm of sort of, questions and things that we could delve into. But maybe we can start by, just hearing from you around sort of, some of the deadlines and things you've been, working on, over the last year or so, because it seems you've always kind of got this work stream of new things that you're trying to juggle and work through, and they can be driven from I guess a few perspectives. It's always about looking after the customer base and but also differentiating what Vodafone brings to the market. And then government have particular goals for the country. So you've got a few masters and so on, I guess, to keep happy. But what have been the highlights from your perspective, Tony?
Well, look, we've pretty much 3 years in new ownership now with Brookfield and Infratil. They've been absolutely brilliant owners. They're all infrastructure guys and engineers, so they sort of get the sort of things that spin my wheels. So the last 3 years have been pretty exciting on the network build out. Obviously, COVID-19 got in the way a little bit. Roaming dropped away, pretty much to nothing. There was no roaming.
Yeah, and that's pretty important. It's been a pretty important part of revenue for mobile carriers, hasn't it, in previous years?
Yes, you got a lot of visitors coming in with international SIM card, roaming SIM cards, and also buy local SIM cards. So roaming dropping away. It's about voice traffic is up to about 60% pre-COVID. So we're starting to see it climb again. We're starting to see a few markets talk about turning off 3G. So we're going to need international roaming on 4 and 5G. So there's a bit of effort, bit of work to go into that as markets develop. So, we're starting to see things come out of that COVID no travel type scenario, and that's why we haven't seen each other for so long almost, isn't it? Yeah. That's good. We still had quite a big build program going on. So with our new ownership, we had a strategy. The strategy was one of the key pillars is called Network Forward, and I'm the exec sponsor of Network Forward. And the idea here was a couple of initiatives. Firstly, what we called Mobile First. And Mobile First was to make sure that we got the mobile network in the best possible shape, rolled out some more towers to get coverage. So one big area was provincial build. So we've built every year since 2020, 65 new towers each year. So this year we're up to about 50. We'll hit 65 by March. Our financial year is March, end of March. We're doing province by province. So we've been doing places like Taranaki, Hawke's Bay, currently doing Canterbury region. The idea is each province you get a critical coverage improvement, and then we drive test it. And we've been getting independent drive test Umlaut, who's now owned by Accenture, to drive test, and we're seeing some absolutely brilliant results in those regions after we do the upgrade. So, we've got a very good Auckland-wide cell phone coverage. Some of the provinces we wanted to improve the coverage, and we've been really heavily investing in that. So that's one big area of work over the last 3 years, and it will continue on.
Yeah, because I guess, from an Auckland-centric perspective, the Vodafone network was always, very, very strong. But I would often hear from, people saying, oh, no, Vodafone not so much in this area or that area from time to time. So with that work, you think that puts you in a really, really good position?
Yeah, well, we announced our TowerCo sale. So we've sold the physical towers. That's the concrete and the steel. All the active equipment we still retain. And one of the benefits of that deal is we've committed to 390-ish towers to be built across the country over the next 10 years. So that means we now have a guaranteed build commitment to get that coverage up. And right now it's building out into those provincial towns. The main area for Auckland and some of the other metropolitan areas, Wellington, Christchurch, we still have some 3G areas where you go from 4G, 5G into 3G. As part of our 3G switch off, which we've said will be August 2024, we will have everywhere where you see 3G will be 4.5G or 5G. So there's a massive upgrade program over the next 18 months to get that complete coverage across the country of 4G and 5G.
Right, and there's still places, and I'm sure it's not just me, where folks will go into areas and particularly when you're sort of way out in the country, right? And I noticed this over the weekend, Northland and out in the sort of back blocks, I suppose, and I came across a road that was closed, and we'll go. That was and so where do we go? And I can't remember whether I was looking at the signal and on the car itself for its data or on mobile phone. So not necessarily sort of specific to all specific to Vodafone. But it was interesting. Like, am I on 2G here? And but we've got so used to the 4G and 5G speeds that's kind of a welcome thing. But how do the different sort of frequencies sort of play into things for those kind of edge coverage scenarios where folks are probably used to from time to time seeing a GPRS or 3G type signal pop up.
So 2G will be turned off a little after 3G. So we'll retain 2G for both international handsets that don't support 4G and 5G calling, but also for IoT, machine-to-machine devices. So that will be around for a bit longer. 3G, August 2024. As I've said, we're going to upgrade every single cell site to have at least 4.5G, and possibly many of them will have 5G as well. So that'll be great for rural, RBI1, the Rural Broadband Initiative Part 1, which we built 154 towers, about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
They will get upgraded, so that'll give us more capacity. RBI2, Rural Broadband Part 2, which is the Rural Connectivity Group. Sorry about all these acronyms. I'm trying to expand them out a little bit.
Yeah.
So the Rural Connectivity Group is a joint venture between 2 Degrees, Vodafone and Spark. I'm currently the chair of that. We had a master build program. So by December 2022, so that's this month, we need to actually have 400 new rural cell towers built. I think
how's that gone?
I think we'll be at 398.
That's
so
pretty
we're
good.
2 out.
Yeah.
So we're pretty pleased about that, actually, given that there's been COVID and there's supply chain issues around the world. To get to be within 2 of our build commit program is pretty impressive, really impressive, actually. The team's done really well.
And what was that window of time for that particular build?
5 years.
Yeah, because that's happened quite rapidly, hasn't it?
Yeah. So there's 5 years for that, and then there's an expansion program, and the expansion program is probably another round about 100 additional cell sites. So that'll be 500 there. So Vodafone has about 1,700 of our own towers, plus this 500. We're up around 2,200 cell phone towers. I actually did some numbers. I think my tenure at Vodafone, I'm about 900 of those.
Okay.
So I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah. That's a lot of build work. And so those sort of scenarios where folks have either have had that sort of poor coverage, that's just going to keep getting better and better. What about folks that are in, say, rural locations and they're trying to weigh up what sort of connectivity that they should have? Starlink has been a big thing in terms of giving people access at a at a good speed in locations that sometimes didn't have any coverage at all. But of course, that's now part of I guess what you have to compete with in terms of your rural offerings.
Well, I actually see it as complementary with RBI1 and RBI2, the sort of rural build out, adding capacity and coverage. We tend to have fibre optics or high capacity microwave for the backhaul, so we're not going to get the capacity constraints that satellites might get. You may remember I used to be CEO and part owner of Farmside many years ago.
Yes.
So I'm quite familiar with the issues that satellite, when they start to get fully loaded, will have. I know this won't have the latency issues that we had with IP Star, but it will have. Ultimately, there'll be capacity issues if it. The performance is really good. We've been testing it with small cells.
Yes.
So we actually have tried Starlink for cell phone coverage as well, and it seems to work. So that was a little.
So the latency is such that you could use that to link up a cell site too.
Yeah, we've tested that and it works. So I think it's complementary. I don't think it's going to be complete, ubiquity. I think it obviously fills in some of the gaps. So all for satellite.
Yeah. And in terms of the sort of the 4.5 and 5G, what does that do for those in those rural areas? Because we've had data caps basically in those a lot of rural locations, right? If you're on an RBI fixed wireless connection, right? So what's happening on that front?
So our fixed wireless access products, you can get quite significant amounts of data, and in some, in fact, are actually unlimited. So I would see that progressively being rolled out over time. It's really around sharing what is a scarce resource. I think you asked a question about spectrum before, and at the moment, a lot of those cell towers at the far edge have got some of the spectrum constraints. So we'll be rolling out more spectrum, like 700 megahertz to all of them, which gives you range. We'll have 900 megahertz, and in some cases 18 and higher frequencies. So we'll get capacity and closer in with the higher frequencies, and coverage with the lower frequencies. So they'll be rolled out progressively to give more capacity. That's the major issue for us.
Yeah, because some areas at the moment, you try to get a connection, and actually it's you'll get bounced back and saying actually we're at capacity at the moment, right? So that's obviously quite important to get that balance right. What do you think are the and I guess you have to draw a line somewhere in terms of how many customers are going to go on to a particular site, and depending on what the technology mix is, I guess plays into that. But how do you measure that in terms of what's an acceptable load?
We measure utilization of a cell site. So with obviously speed, data caps, and number of customers, you've got to balance all of those variables, and you can add more spectrum. The other thing we're doing is adding, with each of the G technologies, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, one day 6G, you get more bits per hertz. So with 5G, we're sort of seeing 8 bits per hertz. With 2G, 3G, it's one bit per hertz. So you're actually seeing a lot more spectral efficiency as well. So that's a good reason for putting out some of these newer technologies.
What do you think is sort of the acceptable performance in a rural location?
It depends what the application is actually. Voice only needs very low bandwidth. Streaming Netflix probably needs 10 megabits per second. So it depends on what you're actually doing, and then how many devices are connected. And
because I guess that's what you have to weigh up, right, in terms of how you spread your service out to how many customers and so on. You could probably give people a certain level, but if it's not consistently at that, and it sort of dips down to, I don't know, a megabit a second, then that's probably not going to work for too many folks, is it? So you have to balance how that
that'll be fine for IoT. It'll be fine for voice, but probably not for streaming high quality video.
So is there sort of a particular level for those rural broadband offerings that you tend to target
As I said,
as a minimum?
it really does depend on the
Yeah, okay.
application and the number of customers, and we do have to black out some of the sites by not selling more capacity just to maintain the service offering we've got.
Yep. I'm curious about that because that's part of the sort of feedback when I get to people, and you'll get some people that are just they're evangelists for Starlink, right? That they put it in and they're like, this is amazing. I'm getting X% sort of better performance than I was on a say a 4G type connection. So I guess
Time will tell.
That's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And now you talked about sort of this move to 4.5G and 5G really across all the cell sites. How much of a premium is it to get to 5G on the cell sites? Because that's quite a step up in terms of investment, isn't it? To do that.
Well, at the moment for 2G, 3G, 4G, we are using the same passive antenna. So you get a multi-input passive antenna.
Okay.
5G at 3.5 gigahertz, we've been putting up basically their rectangular active antennas. So that they are more expensive than a passive antenna. They tend to have massive input, massive output, which is multiple beams inside the antenna.
Yep.
That's how you get things like beam forming, which gives you the capacity. It allows you to start to do some adaptive stuff for types of applications. So it has some real smarts in it, which is good. The problem with 3.5 gigahertz is, we're going to get 80 megahertz of bandwidth, which will give us great capacity for fixed wireless access. It'll give us the ability to do unlimited plans and other things.
Yeah.
What it doesn't do is have the range of the lower frequencies.
Okay.
You're sort of talking clear line of sight, maybe 5 kilometres, and it's not great at penetrating concrete and triple glazing and things like that. So whilst it has capacity, it has speed, it has all those benefits, you have to trade that off with coverage. So at the 700 megahertz, which is the other end, we've got 4.5G. So we have 4.5G, which gives you the coverage layer. 900 megahertz, which is the next block above. When we turn off 3G, we'll be refarming that spectrum for 5G. So we'll have a low band 5G. So you can join the two together.
Yep.
And a lot of these new technologies, you've got the ability to basically aggregate carriers, so aggregate spectrum, basically glue it together. And when you glue it together, you get even more capacity and even more coverage because you've got the coverage at the low band, the speed and capacity at the higher bands. Glue it all together, you get a really good offering. So that's some of the sort of bits and pieces we're going to be doing. So I'm trying to make it sound easy to understand.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And the other aspect, I guess, with 5G and people having 5G sort of a fixed wireless type offering, is the router, the customer premise equipment. That needs to be in home to access that. That equipment's been reasonably pricey, hasn't it? So is that still part of the mix that sort of plays into that adoption of 5G for residential and rural use?
Yes, it has been actually. The main issue has been, I think, with the supply chain, you've seen massive inflation across the board.
Yeah.
Our industry's seen the same thing with equipment supply, delays and price increases. We were hoping to have the CPE cost come down, 30 to 50% over since we launched, which was late 2019, December 2019, we launched 5G. It hasn't come down, but we're starting to see volumes rise around the world. So we'd hope to see the price points come down this early, not this year. We're almost at the end of the year. Middle of next year.
2023. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Now, the eSIM side of things, that's taken a little bit longer to land, but it's here.
Yeah, look, I've got eSIM in my handset, so we've got the handset side of it working fine.
Yeah.
Mainly, people also mix eSIM with wearables. So we'll have wearables in the market next year. We've got the network appliance running now. So basically we can test it. It's a matter of adding it into the plans and making it available in the sort of IT side of the systems.
Yep. Okay. Oh, that's good. That's definitely one I've been waiting for. The other networks have beaten you to the
I know.
the punch.
I know. Sorry about that. That is definitely the case.
Now, the work that you've been involved in as far as sort of emergency services in New Zealand, there's been some really big stuff going on there. There's, I guess, two aspects to that. Can you run us through what's been happening?
Yeah. So we're really pleased about this project. I think it's been about 7 years to get to where we got to. So we had a few trials over the years. The project is Next Generation Critical Communications, NGCC, or Public Safety Network. So overseas, America, Europe, you're starting to see the emergency services use 4G, 5G technology instead of two-way press-to-talk radios. And the reason they're doing that is because they then get the benefits of IoT, they get the benefits of heat sensors, they get the benefits of video, all the other things that come with a cellular service.
Yep.
They also get the ability to access applications, so driver's licenses and other applications where they can have them in real time rather than have to have a notepad. So it's going to increase productivity of the emergency services and the quality of service that they give. So we're seeing that rollout will commence next year. It's a joint venture with Spark and Vodafone. We've formed a joint venture company. I'm on the board of that. And we will be delivering firstly roaming, so you can roam between the two networks. So that will give benefits of coverage and capacity and other things. And there will also be QPP, which is quality of service preemption. So basically the handsets that the emergency services get in a congested environment will preempt and get priority and a grade of service, so they can make calls, do the video, whatever they need to do as the application.
Yeah, I think that bit's quite fascinating. I've heard a few bits and pieces around how that actually operates. What can you share in terms of what could be a real world sort of scenario where that might come in quite handy, and how it would what the difference would be in that emergency scenario for emergency services versus, say, a member of the public whose communication isn't going to be as important.
Yeah, well, if you just rewind, one scenario would be the Christchurch earthquakes, where a number of cell towers had disrupted power supplies. We had 6 rooftop cell towers that ultimately were deconstructed buildings. We put in another 17 roadsides, but that took time to build all of that out. You had a lot of people wanting to make texts, phone calls, send videos, all sorts of things, general public. The emergency services also want to be able to make contact. So in that sort of scenario, the emergency services would get priority. They'd be able to preempt other access. So the scheduler, which basically schedules operations on the network, they get priority. So that they'd be able to make phone calls, stream video, get back to the command centre, all of the sorts of things that you'd expect for the emergency services to get. So that would be one example.
Right, even if there wasn't enough sort of capacity for everyone to be doing that. So if they were lumped in with everyone else, they might find it waiting twice as long for video to get through. Yep. Or if they're doing a live video communication,
that's right,
it actually works rather than being stuffed.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
So historically, there was something that we enabled on our network called emergency network priority access, ENPA, which was a SIM card setting, and you get a number of classes of user. So we'd actually given emergency services ENPA, but it's not as dynamic or fluid as what QPP will be in the new standards. It's more of a SIM card setting. This is a dynamic. So they'll get issued, everybody get issued with a new, they'll retain their phone number, but they'll get a new SIM card with all the right settings on it, an eSIM card, eSIM with the right settings on it to access these services.
Yeah, okay. Now, one thing that Vodafone, had been part of Vodafone Group in the past was the shore signal boxes, the sort of femtocells for if you're in an area without great coverage. And in fact, my home used to be one of those. I've had clients that are, have fallen into that aspect, even in, say, the CBD, because of the nature of their building and other complexities. How's that operating today? Because you've got IP-based calling. Is a femtocell sort of something else that it might come back again in the future?
Yeah, good question. So we launched our femtocell in 2011, and it was just end of life. It had run out of. We couldn't get upgrades for it. So
were they 3G? The original
3G,
ones,
3G, 2100 megahertz.
Yeah.
So we launched that at Bethel's Beach in 2011. So quite a while ago, and basically because 3G is becoming end of life anyway, and we wanted to reuse the 2100 megahertz spectrum for other services. We were rolling out 700 megahertz, which we didn't have prior. When we launched the femtocell, we didn't have the 700 megahertz spectrum. So firstly, we'll have 700 megahertz nationwide, as I've already said, within the next 18 months. Number one, all cell sites will have at least 700 megahertz on it. Number two, 3G is going to be shut off. So the femtocell, we could not get any spare parts for it. So A, better coverage with the macro network. B, 3G switch off. 4, we are actually testing other services with small cells. Small cells is a new type of femtocell. We've been testing that in the lab. We'll be rolling that out in the future. The other thing we enabled since the femtocell was shut down was Wi-Fi calling. So you can actually make phone calls on your Wi-Fi network, and we enabled that to pretty much any broadband service. So people get the benefits of Wi-Fi calling. So I guess there's 3 or 4 alternatives. Plus, to answer your question, yes, we are looking at a replacement.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that'll be very interesting. So walk us through the different types of cell sites now. You've got the femtocell, which is your tiniest one, could go in a home or a business and plug in, and maybe that will come back in the future. Small cells, what are the other variations up to a full-blown sort of cell tower?
So I'll go the other way around. Just for fun. So we start off with your biggest of the big lattice towers that you see, mainly in rural, and they have wide coverage. They can be up to 40 meters high, and you put a lot of technology up those, and that gets you coverage, capacity, range, but they are big.
What's the sort of maximum range that they would reach sort of in each direction?
So with 700 megahertz at maximum power, I did a trial to 25 kilometers. Yeah, so you can probably get further, but 25 kilometers, we're getting pretty good performance.
That's with your 700 megahertz.
That's 700 megahertz. I did that at Lake Brunner quite a few years ago in the South Island as a test.
And then for those that are, their rural broadband connection, what sort of distance would you get?
So that would be a rural. That Lake Brunner was a rural trial to see how far we could get. Right. So I'd be seeing, 20 kilometres easy in rural, as long as it's got, hasn't got a mountain range in front of it or something like that, because it tends to attenuate the signal pretty quickly. So we go from that all the way down. You see a lot of street poles under the Telecommunications Act. You can put a street pole in with lighting and make it look aesthetically good. They're very common. We have quite a few street side towers. And then from that, we go further down. We do things like distributed antenna systems in stadiums and parks, which are basically fibre optics with little antennas off the end of them. We do small cells, which are not much bigger than a Wi-Fi box, and there's 4G and 5G variants of those that we're testing. And then at the very end of the scale, you have the femtocell type broadband products. And we're supporting everything above femtocell now, and we're looking at a femtocell replacement.
So what are some example scenarios with the small cells? And where they're sitting?
Yeah, the small cells are really good because they come in a range of radio frequencies. So as I said before, the 3.5 gig 5G potentially, gets attenuated on concrete and triple glazing, but you can put those small cells with that radio frequency inside a building. So private 5G is a use case where people might be replacing their Wi-Fi with a 5G. You get the benefit of an in-building 5G solution, and then you move outside the building and you just seamlessly transition across.
Yep.
And we've got at least a couple of enterprises actually doing trials of that right now.
Yeah, okay. And I guess we heard as 5G was coming through that potentially, one of the scenarios for 5G might be these sort of private networks and sort of manufacturing type cases and so on, rather than wired.
Remember the demo we had with surgery?
Wi-Fi. So how's that stuff coming along? Is that
Yeah, I think those applications are going to take off, but they have been slower than I guess I expected. Our use case for 5G was really going to be fixed wireless access, and we've already talked about the price points of the CPE, which we hope to see coming down middle of next year. We're doing some private 5G trials at the moment, so I would expect that to take off quite quickly. The emergency services that I was talking about, I see that potentially being a network slice. So a network slice is basically where you can dedicate dynamically some spectrum for a particular use case. So it could be manufacturing, it could be emergency services, it could be IoT. So I see network slices being the next big thing, which sort of intersects all of those things.
Yeah, okay. We don't hear much about the, I guess, millimetre wave band here in New Zealand. Where's that likely to fit in the future?
That's a good question. The millimetric radio, that's around 26 gigahertz, and we've seen in Australia the auction for that, and people getting about 1,000 megahertz of spectrum. So, if you think about, we're getting 2 by 15 megahertz at the 700, you get 1,000 megahertz or 1 gigahertz of millimetric. That means you can get huge capacity. The problem, again, it's a trade-off with distance. You go hundreds of meters rather than tens of kilometers. So you've got that trade-off. We are seeing use cases for residential fixed access.
Yeah, okay.
I think that'll be quite big. In-building coverage solutions will be big, and we'll definitely be doing something with millimetric radio. I've already done some trials a couple of years back. So when that spectrum comes up for renewal in the next few years, we'll definitely be getting some. For instance, one use case could be our HFC network, where we have DOCSIS cable modems in other cities. That could be a use case. Another use case more on the residential side of it.
Oh, interesting. So how would that fit in those types of scenarios?
Well, we've got a lot of street cabinets. We've got
Okay.
Street cabinets in Christchurch and Wellington. You could conceivably see a small antenna up a pole, and it would be driving a number of homes.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And what is happening with the HFC network? Hybrid fiber coaxial.
Hybrid fiber coaxial.
You get sort of around gigabit type.
It's going really well.
With
The
that
speed is
today, right?
Yeah, the Sam knows benchmarking showed the performance of it is really super good at the moment. 900 meg is pretty common for the downlink speeds. We are supporting that product. We are continuing to support it, but probably by the late 2020s, we'll be looking at a replacement for it. We're just working through the planning for that now.
Right. So does that mean you could actually like a physical sort of replacement, or that could be a mobile sort of based option or whatever? All options
are on the table.
Yeah,
because you've got the LFCs, local fiber companies. You've got do you do another DOCSIS replacement? Do you use 5G radio? Do you do fiber to the home and compete? There's a whole raft of options, and at this point we can't really say what we'll be doing, but it's still supported for a while.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating, because there's not too many markets, probably internationally, where there has been sort of overbuild of fibre. But I mean, your network is is in places where people have got access to the HFC as well as the fibre based ultra fast broadband, right? So there's already a little bit of and then some people would have a lot of those scenarios are going to be copper in there as well, which obviously won't be supported for too long.
I would get rid of my copper connection. Do not have copper unless you have to, then replace it with the HFC network or the fibre network. I mean, as you know, the company One New Zealand or Vodafone has 30 years we've been in the market. So 30 years ago, Bell South launched in New Zealand and became Vodafone in 1998. So over that 30 years, we've acquired a number of companies. So Saturn Communications became Telstra Saturn, which became Telstra Clear after merging with Clear Communications. Bell South became Vodafone. All of these companies came together, plus a few internet service providers like iHug, Paradise, World Exchange. So as farm side, as you merge all these companies in, we've got a range of technologies. We've also got a huge asset base. The fibre network that some of those brands I mentioned built out across this country, we have 48,000 buildings within 50 metres of our fibre. We have 8,000 buildings connected with either one or two connections into the building. So we're actually, with the hyperscalers coming to New Zealand, building these massive data centres, looking at how we can actually have a really good B2B product. And we're building some of the fibre out to the hyperscalers now. And we think that, elastic, secure pipes is a really big thing for the future.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so to service the hyperscalers, these massive new data centers that are going in, that's new infrastructure that you've got to put in the ground?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So firstly, the hyperscalers are using a lot of international bandwidth. We've got the TGA cable out of Raglan, we own 46% of that cable. We've been upgrading that. That's multi-terabit per second capacity, and every year we add about 1.2 terabits of international capacity on that cable system.
Yeah.
So that's firstly to get to the international data centres and also all the video content that comes in from offshore. We are also building fibre out to some of the new hyperscaler data centres, and that is so that you can get highly secure, high capacity bandwidth into them for some of these public cloud applications. So it's a super exciting time for the country as far as fibre connectivity. And I see fibre fully complementary with 5G, because you can have 5G access, you can have fibre access, groom it into a really high capacity fibre pipe to either a public cloud in Aotearoa or offshore using the TGA and other international systems.
It's a lot going on, isn't there?
Exponential growth.
and I mean, I remember looking in the basement of the building. We moved into here, a year ago, and seeing Telstra, probably a Telstra Clear logo or two, and whatnot. You talked about there being a lot of, you've got a lot of fibre around the place. I mean, you own copper going into buildings and so on as well. But since the ultra fast broadband initiative, we haven't tended to hear so much about other offerings for getting fibre into buildings. So is that something that's kind of a consideration at the moment?
We do have a lot of on-net customers still.
Yeah. Okay.
And with historically, a UFB connection has been, if you've been having all of your data hosted in a rack and a server on-prem storage, people said, I'm just downloading stuff from the internet, but I do all my office business critical stuff in my rack in the basement. I think the next few years with the hyperscaler data centers, people are going to get, and COVID also started to drive some of this, people are going to take that data that's in the basement of your building and put it into a public cloud. And when it's in the public cloud, you need symmetrical high bandwidth links that are highly secure, because it's going to be hosted in the public cloud. And I think that's going to drive a change in usage.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's your job to figure out these things, and make sure you got the right offerings. So I think that'll be yeah, fascinating to see what that means. Now, in terms of traffic growth, we seem to keep eating up more and more internet. What does that look like? As there's been you're continuing to see a pretty consistent sort of trend in terms of usage growth year to year?
Yes, this year will grow about 30 to 40%. Prior years were up around the 50 to 60%. So the percentages are there or thereabouts, but actually what that translates into is about 32 petabytes of data a month on the mobile network. So quite a big, consumption, and then a percentage increase on a 32 compared to a 10 is obviously quite a big volumetric number. So we're having to, beef up our fibre optic links, our data centres. Every year there's a huge amount of additional build just to service the capacity requirements.
And in terms of equipment, servers needing to get sort of closer to users, has that sort of started changing the business for you at all, in terms of servers being basically sort of at cell sites and so on? We sort of heard about with 5G, I guess, this aspect that you're bringing data closer to users. Has there been much of a demand for that?
Not so much yet. We are doing a mobile edge compute trial. What I think it's going to be horses for courses. So mobile edge compute, private cloud, and public cloud. So there'll be this sort of continuum of storage, and obviously international as well, which we talked about. So that continuum. Mobile edge compute is going to be really useful for high volume, low latency, where you can actually do the number crunching on site. So video surveillance would be a classic. You could do all your video surveillance using mobile edge compute. There's an event of interest, like a crime or car or something so that event of interest, that piece of data using AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, would be sent to the central office, and then you just carry on processing locally. So I see examples like that, autonomous cars, vehicles, those sorts of things, mobile edge compute. Where I think you'd still want access to the public cloud is things like your office productivity suite, like Microsoft or something else. You'd still be going to the public cloud. So it's a continuum. It's a horses for courses.
Now there's this rebrand thing going on. The Vodafone name's getting shortened down to One NZ. Does that actually have some, technical implications for you? Is there quite a bit to think about with that?
It does. So I don't know if you noticed, but there's a thing called NITS, Network Identification and Time Zone. So on the top of your screen, where it has the display, that's the NITS field. So we adapted the NITS field. We can code it. You might have noticed we changed the banners quite a few times over the last few years. Stay safe and Te Reo Language Week or whatever it might be. We've been changing it.
Yeah, quite dynamic with the name of the network there.
So that's one thing. We started chopping off the letters down to one, and we got a few complaints. People said, "Is there a problem with my phone?" Went V, then Vodafone, then Odafone, boom, down to one. So that was one thing we had to change.
Yeah.
But technically, some strange things. You think pit hole covers. I think pit hole covers. There's Saturn, Telstra Saturn, Clear, Telstra Clear, Vodafone. There might even be Bell South out there. So pit covers probably will definitely be having a new branded pit covers. I don't think we'll replace every single one in the country. That could be a bit of chaos.
They're quite interesting, aren't they? Because you get a bit of, it's a little bit like the you have a tree drop down and you can kind of work out its age. There's a little bit of looking at the pit covers and go, oh, it's got a Telstra Clear. Okay, that's this kind of time window maybe when that was put in.
I'm sort of a pit spotter. I'm not a train spotter. I'm a pit spotter. So I do go around and look at the pits. So that's one example. But if you think about it, there's the obvious ones like the stores need to be rebranded, and they're working through what those new stores will look like. They look really good actually. Rotorua is the first one. That's not really in my department so much, but in the technology field, funnily enough, things like billing stacks all need to be changed so that you get the right logos on the bill. Some of those things are actually so old that they're hard coded, so you've got to go through the code and actually find where it says, Vodafone, and replace it with one New Zealand. So there's actually quite a lot of tech work behind the scenes, websites, applications, my Vodafone app, those sorts of things. So quite a lot.
It's interesting. I certainly imagined that a lot of software would have been developed without the thinking that they need to be able to change the brand along the way. So stuff would be hard coded, and if that's a bit older, that can be more of a challenge to work with. And you're still on a journey with sort of completely merging billing systems and that technology. That's been a challenging
we
one.
started something a few years ago. So from iHug, there was the product was called TP2, the Program 2, innovative name. World Exchange had a stack called Bandit. So everybody had their little views. Telstra Clear had a Clarify Keenan-based system, and Vodafone had Siebel BRM-based system. So we had four. We had a bit of everything going on. The old iHug was coded in Delphi. I don't know if anybody remembers these old languages. So we've pretty much migrated most consumers now across to the Vodafone Siebel stack. So that's been progressing. We haven't switched off any of the legacy stacks, and over the next few years, we'll be looking to consolidate and simplify. So there's going to be a big simplification program. People want, unlimited mobile, unlimited broadband, and at a reasonable price. So we'll simplify a lot of the legacy products, and that'll make that job a lot easier to standardise the IT systems.
Yep. So is that what would be the hardest bit of being able to consolidate all of that, because there's always edge cases.
There is always. I mean, we still have on our prepaid platform something called Motormouth. I don't know if you remember when you could have weekend free calling on your
right.
and the texting systems going back to 2G. So we've got to turn all of those off. That's on the prepay side. The biggest issue is making the customer migration as painless as possible, because unfortunately, people get used to the older product and the way it's invoiced and paid and whatever their add-ons are, and making that as painless as possible for the customer. That is what we have to get right. That's the biggest
And that
difficulty.
seems to have been a really big focus under the new ownership. I understand that when you call up for customer service these days, you're dealing with local people in New Zealand again. So there seems to have been a really big focus on that customer experience.
There has been. Jason, my boss, has been extremely passionate about customer facing. That's things like the bringing the call centres back into the country and having them domiciled here. Things like the retail stores being part of our whānau. So bringing it all back together has been big, and part of that will ultimately be this IT and product simplification that goes with it.
Yep. And I see I haven't noticed him too much in the last little while, but he's sort of been pretty accessible on Twitter and whatnot. So I guess he's got a real taste of those scenarios where people maybe haven't had a good experience. He's been hearing from people directly.
He has been hearing directly, and we get a lot of those forwarded to us.
Yep, I think he's even been on the Geek Zone forums and stuff as well. So I think that stuff is really, really cool when there's that much of a focus and interest in the customer and being accessible to hear from them. Obviously, there's some challenges to that too, but it's really good to have that pulse, isn't it, on what's going on and what works and what doesn't for them.
Yeah, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning saying, "How can I make a customer's day unhappy?" So it's best when you hear, "I just got coverage from a new cell tower and I've got this amazing performance." That's what you want to hear. So
yeah. any other things that we've covered quite a bit? Any particular things we've missed or that we should delve into?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot. I mean, as we progress with some of these small cell technologies, be quite happy to come back and have a bit of a chat, bring some samples along with me.
Yeah.
As we head into the vacation season, obviously we've put temporary cell sites out into the region, so everybody going to their holiday hotspots, hopefully they get the performance they're expecting. You know, the usual Coromandels and everything. We're hoping get everybody having a nice hot summer, so want to make sure the coverage is out there for them.
That's very, very helpful. Actually, this last weekend in Auckland, we had a lot going on. I was sort of driving back to Auckland, so I got to sort of see the tail end of it. But we had Eden Park was packed out for Guns N' Roses, I think. Then there was something at Western Springs, I think maybe Christmas in the Park on. How is sort of the latest, in terms of how your network's set up and 5G and so on? How do you cope with those scenarios, and how's the experience sort of different from what it might have been, 5 years ago?
Yeah, so we're going to need to get more 5G into the stadiums. Eden Park has 7 base stations in it with a distributed antenna system.
Yeah.
And some of the stadiums, when people start uplinking to Facebook, streaming video, you do start to see. So I think 5G at some of those stadiums is going to really be a rollout. We have 35 cell sites on wheels. We call them cows, and they're roaming. We've got 35 cell sites on wheels. They get deployed for these special events, and we have a very heavy summer calendar as we migrate them around. Actually, some of you might be interested. We're looking to put a cell site on wheels into Transmission Gully.
Interesting. Because
pre-Christmas,
been a bit
all
of
going well.
A gap there, hasn't it?
Yeah. So we'll get some coverage into Transmission Gully. There'll be ultimately a number of cell sites going along that roadway, but couldn't quite get them in for Christmas. But a cell site on wheels will be going in. So so look, it's temporary coverage. It's more 5G, more in-building solutions that we were talking about earlier.
And we didn't sort of delve too much into IoT, but the Internet of Things, we're on this journey to more and more and more devices. And I've been used to it in my car over the last sort of 3 years or so, having a vehicle that's kind of always on from a connectivity standpoint, or nearly always on. There's the odd times where there isn't coverage and so on. And in fact, I think Tesla have had a few problems with their particular approach. So maybe there's an opportunity for a local telco to pick something up with them. I think they've had Telstra SIMs on some sort of a roaming arrangement, and there's been some dramas there. So probably going on for a couple of months, sort of on and off. I keep hearing people having really bad experiences. I haven't been sitting in the car watching Netflix or anything too much to have noticed it myself. But and other vehicles that are coming in, particularly I think as we move to electric vehicles, there's that expectation for especially some of the new brands to really compete, and so that's one aspect. But there must be lots of other aspects there from the IoT perspective, and I guess there's the power meters that are in our homes, which are largely on 2G. Right. So there's a fair bit sort of keeping you busy there.
Yeah, so IoT, I'd be expecting to ramp quite dramatically. We've rolled out nationwide narrowband IoT, so that's low data, things like power, water, meter readers. We've got LTE-M, which is long-term evolution mobility. So that's multimedia data, so that's video cameras and the like. So there's quite a lot of that growth happening. I would imagine, we were talking about a few years ago, 50 billion IoT devices connected by 2025. I don't think we'll get to that somehow. I think that's certainly the growth that's coming through now. Track and trace is pretty big. Things like containers, medical equipment, that sort of thing. You'll start to see a lot more IoT in that space. Actually, what I didn't talk about is we've launched a mobile virtual network MVNO.
Oh,
My
yes,
Republic are on it
that's
now.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that also will have IoT, so we can wholesale IoT and we can
Okay.
wholesale fixed wireless access. So
Yep,
we actually
yep.
have some products now coming through where we can wholesale the access, of which IoT would be one.
And the one thing that we didn't touch on, which I'd be remiss not to ask about, is we've been hearing out of North America around the role of satellite in the future in a completely different way, right? So Apple with their phones in an emergency scenario, you go and sort of, it'll guide you, and you stand on a hill, and
Yeah.
hey, I'm, whatever the drama is, there's that opportunity to be able to get help in an emergency, and then on the SpaceX and Starlink side, that they've talked about a deal there with T-Mobile to I guess effectively put a cell tower in the sky, 500 kilometers up, or 550, or wherever they end up finalizing, and that being an option for T-Mobile customers. Now, I'm not, and I think there's been a few others sort of these things going on. Do you think that's going to be something that will be relevant to New Zealand?
Yeah,
in the years ahead?
I do. Obviously, these sorts of things are commercially sensitive at the moment,
yeah.
but when it's available, we'd definitely be looking at it, because I think, especially if you're tramping, we're a country of great outdoors places to go, boaties, camping, tramping. You won't get a macro tower necessarily there, but this will be very useful for search and rescue, safety type applications. I don't think you'll get gigabytes of download, but you will get SMS, voice, those sorts of applications.
Yep. Yeah, because we've had sort of those EPIRB, emergency, devices that you're always recommended to take if you're, going off into the tramping into the wilds, and have some way have those emergency locator beacons. So
that's right.
So making that technology sort of more mainstream and more accessible has got to be an upside from a safety perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, we've been quite good on innovation. We've just announced, you might have seen the 5G lab at the Auckland University Business School. So we're keen to see innovation. Hopefully some New Zealand startups will make use of it, and we'll have our own version of Starlink or something coming out of the 5G lab. But the other thing we did a few years ago, we did a search and rescue where we put a base station in a helicopter, and the helicopter flew over the forest, and when the mobile phone attached, we knew where the person was. So these sort of technology is going to be great for that sort of thing as well. With the satellite up there, you'll be able to locate the person, and
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Tony. Really appreciate catching up, and
thank you.
Thanks for sharing some insights on what's going on in the world of Vodafone, soon to be One NZ. So we'll look out for that. That's coming sometime in sort of the early part of 2023, the
early
rebranding.
2023.
Once you've figured out all the technicalities and behind the scenes of how do you change Vodafone to One NZ and all your apps and billing systems, and I guess there's a fair bit on the marketing side as well to be looked after there. But all the best with that.
Thank you very much, and have a great Christmas vacation period.
Yeah, likewise. Hey, well, thanks everyone for joining us on the NZ Tech Podcast. We'll look forward to catching you again on the next episode. So go well. Cheers.
Bye.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.